Welcome into, folks. Welcome into a highly anticipated episode of the Bama Elite Touchdown. Alabama Magazine, yours truly, Stephen Smith of TDA. Got the man Justin Smith right here with me, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown. Alabama Magazine, Crimson Tide fans, you've been praying about it. You've been dreaming about it. You're probably about to put in an extra $20 in Sunday's offering collection plate at church. I don't know what you did, but the chaos continues to ensue as of today with USC going down last night in the Pac 12 championship game and TCU falling to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. Bama right there, front and center, with the opportunity, should the committee rule in favor of a tie, to get into the college football playoff on tomorrow as the number 4 seed. Let's get into it right now here on the show. Got Justin Smith here with me. Justin, this is crazy. I mean, fans have been talking about it. Can Bama Nation dream? Could the dream become real? Could we see the chaos like we saw back in 2011 when Alabama lost 6-9 to LSU in the game of the century, and so many teams lost after that week, putting Bama back in the driver's seat for the BCS National Championship? I'm a history buff myself, so I wondered, would history repeat itself? It has, with Tennessee losing, with Clemson losing, with Oregon losing, with USC losing, with LSU losing, with TCU losing. Alabama right there back in potentially the driver's seat. It depends on what does the committee say and or do on tomorrow, as it's Selection Sunday. But Justin, I mean, how's the blood pressure doing on your end with all the chaos that's happened?
Yeah, I'm good, Steven. Yeah, it's definitely been some good football to watch, and just looking at the different games and how it will impact college football. So yeah, looking at Alabama's chances, I think Alabama right now is at least considering everything that they have went through this season with them suffering those two last second losses. I think they are just really happy, and I think Alabama fans are happy to at least be in the conversation. At least there is a discussion to be had, and I think that is why we are here right now to have that discussion, comparing them to TCU, Ohio State. And I know the Tennessee fans, they want to be thrown in the mix. So just comparing those teams and seeing which team should we feel should get into the playoff.
It's going to be an interesting debate here and conversation, Justin. But let's start this right here. Let's start this right here with TCU, the team that went down today. And I understand a lot of Big 12 fans are going to say, well, TCU's only got one loss. They should get in. They got to the conference championship game, lost by 3 to Kansas State. But at the same time, I feel like here's the reason why TCU should not get in here. So the wins that the Horned Frogs have, though they've beaten some top 25 teams this season, all of their wins have come from close cardiac arrest type wins. The committee can't turn on the tape and go, okay, TCU dominated this game from start to finish, because that's one of the criteria of the committee. They want to turn the tape on and say they start the domination at point here and they continued it throughout the remainder of the game. And we can't turn on tape to see when the TCU dominate from start to finish. We don't see it. We've seen TCU come out the gate behind by 20 to 28 points and have to fight back to win. We've seen moments where TCU has lost the lead and has had to fight back to win. So when you look at this matchup against Kansas State, you go up against a 3-loss Wildcats team, and with the offense under Garrett Riley, with the TCU defense that's been solid all year, the committee's probably thinking, okay, here's a game where TCU can take control. But even with a 3-point Kansas State win, TCU never had control of the game. They never had control. So with the games that they've played, they've never had complete dominance from start to finish. And then you struggle with the Kansas State team that you lost to. I think TCU is out of there. When you look at Ohio State, yes, people may vouch for them, but the Buckeyes, you're at home at the Horseshoe in Columbus, and you lose by 22 at home to Michigan, against a Michigan team that doesn't even have their best player, Blake Corum, out for the year. You look at the Buckeyes with their offense, C.J. Stroud, Heisman Trophy quarterback. You got two big-time receivers in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson and Jigba, and you get killed by Michigan at home. You get killed by Michigan at home. So I look at this. I know Michigan's playing Purdue tonight here in the Big Ten championship game. I just think, to me, when you look at all the chaos that needed to happen for Alabama, it just happened. All the chaos that needed has just happened. Now I understand for Kansas State, you for Bama Nation, you would have liked to have seen Kansas State blow TCU completely out by 14 plus, and that would have made it more convincing. I get that. But with the fact that TCU never had control of this game from start to finish, Kansas State pretty much controlled the pace of the game, even though it won by 3 points. And then you've got TCU all season, all of their wins have been won cardiac arrest type deal. And then the committee wants to see, could you take care of a 3-loss Kansas State team? They didn't do it. So I think off that merit, I think Alabama is in there as one of the four teams. I think they're in there. I literally think they're in there. I mean, to me, Justin, this just feels like 2011. It just feels like 2011. I don't think that. I think when the committee makes a deliberation on tomorrow, especially if Michigan beats Purdue, I think it should be Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Bama at 4.
Yeah, that's a strong one for Steven. I know Alabama fans would love for that to happen. But going back to the TCU argument, I've watched TCU play a couple of times this season. I watched them play against Iowa State, which was a blowout. TCU blowed them out, and I saw them play against Baylor as well. And TCU looked good against Iowa State because Iowa State wasn't the best team, of course, and TCU look basically the same way they looked today against Baylor when they escaped with the field goal win. But I think with all the criteria that you look at for the college football playoffs, strength of schedule, just all the different things that the college football playoff selection committee has to take a look at. I think one thing that everyone seems to get away from when it comes to comparing Alabama to TCU is that one thing that sort of separates, almost kills most of those arguments, is that is one team just flat out better, like the eye test. That's one thing I think you have to consider, which is what Nick Saban is currently trying to persuade the committee to look at in terms of what if Alabama was to face this team right now. What would the point spread be? Who would be favored? Who would be the underdog? And I think we take a look at what the college football playoffs committee's main purpose is and what their main goal is to put the four best teams in the college football playoff, period. We want the four best teams in the playoffs. And you take a look at that, teams that are considered, I think when we take a look at that, I think I would lean more towards your way if you just take a look at it from the eye test perspective. Put the four best teams, the four most talented rosters in terms of the games that they have played. I think we'll lean your way. But I don't know if the committee is going to lean that way just based on how things have transpired over the last couple of weeks, especially the way that national media wants to paint it. For sure, it's most of the national media has totally written off Alabama. They don't even want to talk about a scenario where Alabama gets in. I think has been that way technically for the last couple of weeks. But taking a look at Alabama and TCU, there's a lot to consider. I think the biggest thing that the committee seemed to really like about TCU is that, and what may work against Alabama is that they have a win over Penn State. Penn State is a top 10 team. Technically, I wouldn't say they're a top 10 team because of the eye test. They're a top 10 team because other teams have lost. Same thing with Kansas State. Kansas State is ranked as high as they are ranked because other teams have lost. And you take a look at Kansas State, are they really a top 10 team? Just looking at Kansas State, I think you can make an argument that they're not even a top 10 team, but just based on what has happened around other teams around them, they are a top 10 team. And you take a look at that TCU game now, them sticking with Kansas State, that could possibly still be a solid win because Kansas State is possibly going to jump up a couple of slots in the college football playoff committees in terms of those rankings. So I think that is what is working against Alabama, not the eye test, not people on the flat out say, yo, let's bring the four best teams. But I think TCU will possibly get in because they're going to be, quote unquote, deserve, because they quote unquote deserve to get in. Although the college football playoff committee's main goal is always to put the four best teams in, but I think if TCU gets in, I think it's going to be the four most deserving teams based on wins and losses.
Okay, Justin, coming at it from that angle then. So hear me out here. So when you look at this from Alabama's perspective, that Bama lost to LSU, but LSU made it to the SEC championship game to face Georgia. So what does that tie in? Okay, so Alabama beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss has been a strong team all season with Lane Kiffin. So where does that sort of tie in? You look at Mississippi State. That was one up against Mississippi State. Mississippi State it's a 7 to 8 win team this season. Pretty decent record there. You look at Texas and the job that Steve Sarkisian has done. They've had a pretty strong year. So if you look at Alabama's strength of schedule, also it's right there, with TCU. So I'm not arguing that fact. What my case is on the biggest stage. This is the biggest stage. It's the Big 12 championship game. TCU is basically at home. That game is played in Dallas, Texas. That's right there. TCU is in the Dallas Fort Worth area. So this is essentially a home game for the Horned Frogs. And you're facing a three-loss Kansas State team. You're supposed to boat race those guys. You're supposed to boat race those guys. That's how it's painted. But you do not boat race them, especially with your offense under Garrett Riley, who's averaging, 40 plus points a game. That's supposed to be a steamroll. And it did not happen. And you lose that game by three in what's essentially a home game against a three-loss team. Now, granted, if Alabama was in the situation that TCU's in, and Alabama loses to a three-loss team, you're ready to coast Alabama completely out of the playoff. But I get it from your perspective, what you're saying. This is an intense conversation, no matter how many points you break it around. I remember when the committee first started this in 2014, when the CFP first started, one of the main things that they put their eye on was, okay, when we put on this tape and we watch you play in any particular game, especially the big ones, the conference championship ones, right? Can we turn on this tape and we can see from the moment you start the game to the moment you finish the game, your dominance from start to finish. And just about every game this season, with the exception of a few, I can't one or two. I can't turn on the film and watch. Okay, TCU took this over from start to finish. Yes, they've won every game, but what games were there where TCU just completely manhandled teams where the committee is like, holy goodness, TCU looks incredible. There's not any game except maybe one or two where TCU's done that.
Yeah, I think the biggest, when, if in my opinion, once the committee goes into their room and have the discussion of who gets into the playoff, I think the biggest thing that for Alabama to possibly get into the playoffs, they have to hope that the selection committee look at it the way that I said earlier, that they are looking at Alabama has just been unequivocally better than TCU, because I think the optics just don't work in Alabama's favor in terms of where those teams are ranked. Yeah, I know you brought up Ole Miss, you brought up Mississippi State. Those are solid wins because we know those teams are solid teams, and you know that the SEC is one of the best conferences in college football. But when you take a look at the rankings, Ole Miss is nowhere to be found in college football top 25, if I'm not mistaken. Mississippi State crawled up in there, and they're one of Alabama's best wins right now. And Texas is in there now, and Texas is Alabama's best win. When you take a look at TCU, not their best win now, because they have a good loss now with Kansas State. So I think the optics sort of work in TCU's favor in terms of the criteria that the selection committee will take a look at. But based on what the committee was designed to do, pick the four best teams, I think it should be those four teams that you said. But just taking a look at all of the other things that they have talked about looking at over the last couple of weeks, I'm not sure if Alabama gets in just based on those criteria that are set and just based on where those teams are ranked.
Before we continue, Justin, this incredible conversation here on a Saturday as it's conference championship game weekend, more chaos has ensued. Got to shout out, our guys, the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream. If you can't catch us right here, the Bama Elite Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Hit that like button, raise those likes, give us a thumbs up here on the podcast. Best podcast conversation you're going to find talking Bama football, the Bama Elite right here. You can't check us out. You get to the big game, a college football podcast network and audio stream for the best college football coverage in the South. Also, check out our guys at Prize Picks. They do a phenomenal job. Our sponsors right there in terms of fantasy sports, whether your flavor is college football, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, UFC, esports, boxing. Check them out right there. Prize Picks. It's you against the projections. If you put in your deposit of $50 to $100, you can get that matched right back to you. If you're doing it from the Bama football perspective, you use the code BAMA100. That's BAMA100 Prize Picks. Check those guys out right there. Well, Justin, if you look at it right now, Coach Saban already, as you mentioned, he's campaigning for his team to get into the college football playoff. We've heard after the Iron Bowl, Will Anderson made his pitch for Alabama. Bryce Young made his pitch. We saw the hilarious TikTok video with Terry and Arnold with his auto-tuned voice. Can you please let us in? Terry on and Jordan Battle, making a little video right there. And they had Bryce Young as a featured guy in that video. So Alabama's making this pitch here to the committee. I understand the main thing is, and Coach Saban always says it, you want to control your own destiny. You don't want your destiny put in somebody else's hands. Unfortunately, it got put in the committee's hands because Alabama dropping the game to Tennessee, dropping the game to LSU. So the destiny was put in somebody else's hands. However, the conversation has been, if chaos would happen, Alabama would have a shot. And we've gotten this chaos from several teams losing. As crazy as the scenario is, and as much as everybody will have their eyeballs glued to ESPN tomorrow morning for the selections to come out, Justin, I'm gonna have to refer to you because I'll be in church putting my offering in the collection plate tomorrow. So I will be referring to you as far as the selection committee is concerned. But from your vantage point, Justin, I mean, how do you see this shaking? How do you see this swerving out here?
Well, yeah, there's a lot to still be considered because I think if I'm not mistaken, I'm not watching the game right now. You guys can update me in the chat. I think Purdue is giving Michigan a game. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're leading the Wolverines right now. And
Oh
that
my
has
goodness, Purdue, boil her up. Look at Purdue over there.
I think that has an impact on everything too, because I think that hurts Ohio State if Purdue pulls out a win. So I think that could impact on what I think will happen tomorrow. So we'll see what happens on that route. But to be honest, like I just take a look at what the committee always talks about, looking at all of those different things, making it to conference championships and all those different factors. I'm leaning more towards TCU getting in over Alabama, but that doesn't mean that I feel TCU is better than Alabama because, like I said, I feel Alabama is one of the four best teams in college football. If I had to say so myself, but just taking a look at the different criteria that the college football playoff committee looks at, I think they will put TCU in over Alabama.
So, Justin, let's just say for all hypothetical purposes here, let's say Alabama gets in. Let's say the committee puts Alabama in here. And let's say it is Bama, let's say it is Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Bama. The TV ratings would go crazy. The revenue would go crazy. Fans would be watching because these are the four biggest brands here when you talk about college football. Let's say Bama gets in. Do you think this team, with another shot, with the fresh breath of life, do you think this team could take it to a national championship and win? And do you think this is just the switch needed for Bryce Young to do this?
I think this just based on the teams that are in it that are considered. I think Alabama has an opportunity to beat all of those teams. Georgia, I think they can beat them, but I think it definitely would be a close game. And just looking at the way things could shake out, I think in Alabama, if if things play out the way that they are projected to play out from now on in terms of Michigan beating Purdue, then you're looking at similar to what you said. I think it's exactly what you said. Georgia number one, Michigan number two, Ohio State number three, and Alabama number four. I think the you can make an argument that that semifinal game would be a little bit easier than the championship game. Is taking a look. I mean, the semifinal game will be harder than the championship game when you match up against Georgia. But I think the Crimson Tide definitely can win a national championship with this team, just based on the field and the teams that they will go up against. Just the guys who are still in the mix to make the playoffs. So I don't really doubt that. I think they have the talent around them. All of those teams have flaws. Alabama has flaws as well, but every team that's being considered right now has flaws.
Justin, people want to talk about Saban losing it, but I mean, dude, you want to talk about Alabama is the needle for college football. Everybody's talking Alabama right now. I mean, everybody. When you look at pundits from Colin Cowherd to Shannon Sharp to Pat McAfee to Dick Vitale. I mean, Dickie V has even jumped up in here. So you can just tell how much weight Alabama carries when you talk about college football. Everybody's discussing, is Alabama in? Can Alabama get in here? Oh my gosh, can Alabama backdoor its way into the college football playoff? Everybody and their grandmother on an oxygen tank is talking about the Crimson Tide having the opportunity to kind of backdoor its way in here, so to speak. And I mean, it is incredible hearing the ongoing conversation of this. So, I mean, this is exciting. This is fun. I would not want to be in Grapevine, Texas right now. I would want to be in Grapevine, Texas right now, in that room with everybody making this decision. I don't envy those guys. I really do not envy those guys making that decision, because this one right here was tough. I mean, I know if the committee goes in favor, Justin, of TCU, then you would have to go Bama Sugar Bowl, Bama Orange Bowl, Bama maybe Fiesta Bowl also, New Year's Six Bowl, regardless if Alabama if the committee goes TCU in terms of the playoff. But I just look at this. I mean, Justin, everything that Bama wanted to have happen, right? I mean, ever since the LSU loss, took care of Ole Miss, took care of Austin P, took care of Auburn, and then you needed the LSU to lose. You got it. You needed Tennessee lose. Tennessee lost big time to an unranked South Carolina team, huge unranked South Carolina team. Bama got that. You know, it needed Clemson to lose. Clemson falls to South Carolina. It needed to just so many things to happen. USC lose. That happened. It needed TCU to lose. That happened. I mean, the Ohio State loss was the Ohio State loss hurt a little bit, but I think it also maybe helped a little bit in terms of the optics of what you want to look at that. But at the same time, all the chaos that was needed has happened. So I truly feel like if the committee looks at this from the viewpoint of TCU, I mean, you had a chance to knock out Kansas State big time, and essentially when it was a home game for you, it didn't happen. Kansas State controlled it from start to finish, despite only winning by 3. So it's man, like I said, the only thing that the Bama Nation wants more, and I've said this: if Kansas State would have won by 14 plus, this would not be an argument right now. It would not be an argument. If Kansas State won by 14 plus, it's a done deal. Because blowout, done deal. But because the Wildcats could only win by 3, now here comes this very sticky gray area conversation that not many people want to have. And I throw myself into that thing also. So it's wild, man. It's just wild, Justin.
This TCU Alabama debate, which I think is going to be the biggest debate. I think throw Ohio State in there as well, because they you can't say that they deserve to be in just absolutely over TCU. At least they made it. At least TCU made it to the conference championship, and I'm pretty sure they can use that argument against Alabama as well. But In the end, I think it is simple. I think Tobias talked about it in the chat, and which is what I said earlier in the show. It seems as if TCU gets in over Alabama. It seems more like it is looking more so as the most deserving team to get in instead of just flat out being the best team. And I know the argument that many people have made against Alabama is that Alabama has not looked like a top four team a lot this season, which a lot of people can agree on. I think Alabama fans will agree with that as well, just based on the play calling and some of the challenges and the way that Alabama has looked at certain times this season. But then again, they only lost by two plays. Two plays have put them in this position. Taking a look at TCU, one of their biggest wins was Kansas State. Actually, that was one of their best wins on the season. But you have to wonder, how does this loss impact that win that it did have on Kansas State earlier in the season? Of course, Alabama and TCU does have a coming opponent as well, which is something I saw in the chat. Both of them played Texas. I know a lot of people are talking about how Alabama beat Texas's backup quarterback once Quinn Ewers went down by a field goal. Also taking a look at TCU, which is when you hear people talking about that argument, they sort of painted that TCU blowed out Texas, but I think it was only like a 7 point win, so it wasn't a dominant performance by TCU either. So yeah, I think you're going to be just picking out very fine things when it comes to that debate between TCU and Alabama. Like you said, I don't want to be on the college football playoff committee either because there's a lot that they have to look at now that those upsets have happened, and just taking a look at this Michigan Purdue game, and if Michigan goes down, there's even more to bring to the conversation.
I'll even say this, Justin. Do you remember when the committee once had said, if an injury happens, we will look into that too. You go back and you look at the injury to Bryce Young, right? The injury to Bryce Young against Arkansas earlier this season, and how that really impacted Alabama's offense. Because if you go back and you watch the Iron Bowl, that was the healthiest Bryce Young has looked since earlier in the season. And you know, a healthy Bryce Young, this Alabama offense is not pedestrian. A healthy Bryce Young, this Alabama offense can put some points here on the scoreboard. And I remember just years back when other teams would lose games or struggle in games, but then the committee would find out, okay, this team's star player is hurt, or he's out, or he's injured, or he's not 100%. We will take that into consideration. Well, where is the take into the consideration? Okay, Bryce Young was out. I mean, Bryce Young was hurt. Bryce Young was not 100% out there, but he was still out there gutting it out, trying to put this team in every position and not only win football games, but set it up for the college football playoffs. So that'd be my thought right there. In years past, when there have been injuries, committee goes, you know what, homeboy, pimp juice, you got hurt. We'll look into it. We'll evaluate it. Okay, Bryce Young did not play against Texas A&M, injured against LSU. Well, was 100% against LSU or Tennessee, but I'm not saying, where's the taking into consideration there. But once again, that's just me. Justin, go ahead. You there,
You,
Justin? Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, 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 I'm here. I know you were talking about the injury thing. I think most of the people when the comments will say this too. The college football playoff committee has contradicted itself so many times. Just taking a look at what it considers and what it weighs and all of those different things. Going back to what you said about the injury. No, we haven't heard anyone bring it up to the playoff committee, even committee selection committee, even Boo Corrigan, the chairman. I don't think he was even asked about it at any point how that will impact Alabama football. But you're correct. We have seen chairmen in the past say that, yo, we are going to look at injuries, all of that play a role. We're going to look at all of these different things. But when you take a look at this committee, I've seen so many contradictions over the last couple of seasons. So it's just so much you have to consider, and so it's so many different directions that you can just take this conversation just taking a look at the teams that are considered. I think the biggest thing is the Alabama TCU debate. With the way that TCU looked today, that is the way that they've looked all season. When I watched them play, I thought Kansas State had many opportunities to, like you said, blow out TCU today. Just taking a look at the way that they played, that muff punt was a huge part of the game.
The
TCU.
safety, the safety that got called back, that was a huge play right there. And then, there was an interception that Kansas State had they just could not grab a hold of. There was a couple of missed throws also in that game from Kansas State.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking. Let's take a look at what Nick Saban is saying, which is what I felt early on too. Is if you just picture in your mind these teams playing, who will be favored in those games? Isn't that who is at least considered the best? Because that's what you're doing as a committee. You're taking a look at the four best teams. So you're going to take a look at the teams who are perceived to be the best teams. So if Alabama is going to be favored over those teams, they are one of the best teams. So yeah, in the end, I think it'll come down to, especially if TCU gets in, the most deserving team. I think in by the playoff committee's criteria, TCU is more deserving of the spot than Alabama. But taking a look at who is the best team, I think it is Alabama, and I think most people know that, but they don't want to put Alabama in. I think that's one of the biggest conversation that a lot of people are against Alabama. Just taking a look at what the college football playoff is. I think they are more so leaning towards all of the criteria that goes in it. But I don't think many people in their hearts, even though they may say it out of their mouth, I don't think many people deep down feel that TCU is better than Alabama.
Oh man, woo wee! Tomorrow, the selection committee makes their play. Bama Elite touchdown. Alabama Magazine right here on YouTube. Justin Smith, lead scouting and recruiting analyst for TDA. Yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Thoughts here on the college football playoff, Bama or TCU debate happening right now. And it's crazy. It is crazy. I mean, it is. I mean, dude. Justin, I couldn't be on the panel, man. I could not be on the panel. I could not be on the college football playoff committee panel, man. I couldn't do it because of the absolute stress, man. The absolute stress here at this time, folks. As always, the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream give you the best college football coverage in the South. College Football Podcast Network and audio streamer. Appreciate you guys right there. And also check out our guys at Prize Picks. Great sponsor right there, giving us all that you need there on fantasy sports. Prize Picks right there. But Justin, those would be my four. If I had to call it, I would call it Georgia, Michigan. Should they hang on to beat? Should they beat Purdue? Ohio State, and Alabama at number four. I mean, those are the four best teams, in my opinion. Those will give you the four best ratings. Those will give you the four best attendance right there. That's the four best eyeballs. That's the four biggest brands. That would give you exactly what you need right there. Because I mean, let's be honest here. If TCU gets in, nobody wants to see Georgia stranglehold TCU. No, nobody wants to see Georgia and Kirby Smart just stranglehold TCU. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
At least you get Bama in there. Bama's going to give Georgia a game, and I also feel like at any given moment, because you think about it, Alabama played Georgia in the SEC championship game and won that game last year. And if not for an injury to Jamison Williams early on in the game, because Jamison had ran away from the Georgia DB in question, if not for an injury there, I mean that was going to look like a win right there of a national championship last year between Alabama and Georgia. So I mean TCU in there against the Dogs. To me that's a snooze fest. I mean that's a snooze fest because Georgia's defense was going to clamp down TCU.
yeah, I think that'll be definitely a mismatch. Just taking a look at the way TCU has looked the way when I've seen them, especially with they basically their receivers couldn't get open, and basically Kansas State didn't have a spy on their quarterback, so he basically ran free. And I'm pretty sure that's something that Georgia's going to be royal prepared for it. So I think that game would be lopsided if those teams face off against one another. But I just go back to what I've said earlier: the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, national analysts, just anybody talking about the College Football Playoff have contradicted themselves in so many different ways, going back and forth, said this matters now, but this doesn't matter here. For example, I think ever since the College Football Playoff Committee has been a thing, conference championships have been so important. But I've heard so many national analysts today say that the conference championship shouldn't be held against those teams, saying that they shouldn't be punished because they played an extra game. I've heard a lot of people say that, and I haven't heard that in the past in terms of conference championships. And going back to what you said, we heard injuries a lot in the past, but we haven't heard injuries bringing up the Bryce Young discussion. So yeah, the College Football Playoff Committee and anybody talking about it, you're gonna hear so many different things and so many different discussions from people who are going to discuss the things that should be important.
Can I just say this one thing before we get ready to sign off here, Justin? Can we get Archie Manning and Condoleezza Rice back on the committee? I mean, I just feel like this. When the committee first started in 14, and Jeff Long was the chairman, was the head chair, and you had Condoleezza Rice and Archie Manning on that committee, they had it right. I mean, that committee watched tape. They watched it every single week. They broke it down every single week. It was like nobody had anything negative to say about that committee with Condoleezza Rice on there because that committee did their thing. I mean, that committee did exactly what they needed to do there. But it is what it is there. Folks, on tomorrow, ESPN, they'll have it there, baby. They will have it there. So they'll have it there in terms of the top four teams that will go into the college football playoff.
Yeah, so I want to cut you off, Steve. But I don't think I gave my prediction of who the top four teams will
Go ahead.
be. If it stays the same, to be honest, I think TCU gets in over Alabama. I don't think they deserve to get in over Alabama, but I think according to the criteria and the what people have pushed as far as what should be considered, I think they're going to slide TCU in. But I do feel Alabama is the better team, and I think that is what the College Football Playoff Committee was put together to do, pick out the four best teams. But I just feel like with all of this talk about the script of schedule, all of the home and away, and just all the different things. And from my understanding, I always thought that if a team was just better, all of that gets thrown out the window. If you feel a team is just better, all of the rest of the other things get thrown out the window. If you think a team is unequivocally better. And in my opinion, I think you can make an argument that Alabama is unequivocally better than TCU. But so I think TCU will get in over Alabama, but I think it's going to be more because they are deserving according to what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee criteria is.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. So, folks, tomorrow, get your popcorn ready, as my man Jarvis S said in there in the chat. Now, get your popcorn ready. Bama and this college football playoff. We will see what goes down, what happens. Justin's got TCU going in there and seeing how the committee may look at this as most deserving. Me personally, I think Bama's in there as the number 4 team. I think Bama's done with it. Even though Bama with 2 losses, Bama's got the chaos it needed. TCU did not whoop up on Kansas State. A 3-loss team beat TCU, even though it was not a blowout. Kansas State controlled that game, and all the chaos needed to happen, had to happen for the Crimson Tide. But folks, tomorrow, check out the College Football Playoff Committee selection show to see what goes down. For all of us here at TDA, for Justin Smith, I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. This has been the Bama Elite. Appreciate you guys.